So this is my favorite class, Google Analytics. I'm so excited. Save the best for last of the 4-part series. So I'm sure Jenny will be here soon. We'll go ahead and get started. So why don't we go around the room and just say hello, because we have a couple new people here today. But I'll lead off. I'm Paul Hickey, for those of you who don't know me very well. Data-driven design does web design, development, and marketing. And so because of that, we try to have this key differentiator of using data to drive web design decisions and digital marketing decisions. But one of the things I've learned is you can go really far down a rabbit hole with that. So today's class is going to be fairly basic around Google Analytics 101, but then also how to use it and how to apply it to web design principles and digital marketing principles and principles of just general business, because it's more than a web analytics tool, it's a business intelligence tool as well. So that's what I'll be showing you guys today. And I'm self-taught. Started about 10 years ago teaching myself. So it's all just what I've accumulated and what our team has accumulated, the people I've worked with throughout the years on it. So if you want to go around.
My name is Galen Wilson. I work with National Pro Fast Pitch. It's women's professional sports. And I also run a program called Business Boost for the Mount Juliet Chamber.
Megan Jones. We work for Innovate Medical, and we sell mobile workstations. And I'm actually super excited though today, because we are really trying to push some leads. So I'm hoping that this Google Analytics will definitely help us.
Definitely.
And I'm Sean Hager. I work for Operation Stand Down, which is a veterans nonprofit, and I run a thrift store component of that, which is also a training program, and I also do all the marketing for the store as well. So I and I'm never going to get an intern now. So
Nonprofit. Brittany Bingley. I got married, so my name's changed. I started my own business this year called Cloud Cycle. We do digital marketing, and it's like I'm really good at getting the campaigns going. It's trying to make the decisions and trying to get better at data. Like Facebook data, I understand pretty good. Google AdWords makes my eyes cross. So this was the class I was looking the most forward to, this whole thing. So.
Awesome.
Cool.
Sherry Dennis, New Portland Group. Also looking forward to this. I've been spoiled in that I used to have like people who did all the work and gave me the reports. I didn't realize how great it was having people. So now I'm the people. Paul, bless his heart, has tried to teach me as best as he can in between stuff going on. And I've tried actually going on myself doing to get certified, and that's a goal for 18. So I just want to understand this.
Awesome.
My name's Rachel Ryan. I work at Reed Public Relations. I'm the digital strategist, so I lead our social media accounts. I'm a social media girl, but like you were saying, when, one thing about digital, you get all the questions about everything. So just trying to learn beyond social media.
Kate Hickey, data-driven designs, digital strategist as well, and Paul's wife.
Kate, you work with Katie?
I do.
Yeah, she spoke at our
Oh, cool. Yeah, the
business
Mount Juliet
boost.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool.
I'm Mary. I'm a content strategist, and I do a little bit of web design, a little bit of social media, and blog writing.
Yeah. So Kate and Bailey are part of our team, and then Chris will be here later. He went to a different location. There's 2 East Spaces locations, so he went to the other one. He'll be here soon. But yeah, so I'm really excited to have everyone here. This means a lot to me that you guys all came and are so interested in learning Google Analytics. This will be life-changing for you today, without a doubt. Like, it'll open up this whole new area that you can dig into and figure out how to help whatever business that you're involved in, or even in the future. Like, this will be skills that you guys can all use in the future to help, whether it's like a side hustle where you've got your own thing going on in addition to your full-time job, or whatever career move that you want to make, or just helping grow the company that you guys are with. It's that's how this is a tool that's helped me throughout my career. when I started getting sick of my full-time job back in, what was it, like 2005 or 2006, I started my own website on the side and realized like, okay, I need to have a way to drive traffic to this website. I need to grow it from scratch. And so I realized Google had this free tool, and all you had to do was put this snippet of code on your website and it would tell you everything you need to know about how people got to your website, how long they stayed on each page, and basically what other sites were linking to you, and then how long that traffic stayed on each page. And so that kind of became the path for, all right, now here's all these other opportunities that I can go out and get new web traffic. And if you would pay for web traffic, it's also an indicator on how well those visitors are performing on your site. So there's hours and hours and hours of class material that we could get into in Google Analytics, and I purposely wanted to make this one a 101 class, because I just feel like so if you do, like I would actually recommend, if you get into this, spending some time. Google Analytics has an academy. Google has a Google Analytics Academy. It's all web-based, and I believe it's free, but it's very much like taking a class in school. It's very much like sitting in a classroom in school and not necessarily being able to apply the principles. So what I try to make today's class focus on is more how we can just get to what would get you in and out and apply like the key principles. And then we'll probably have, the reality is our data-driven academy will likely have more like Google Analytics 201, 301, and things like that, because there's just so much that we could get into. So, and you'll see that today. So today's core learning targets are a little bit around why Google Analytics, a little bit more on that, how to set it up, and then read the basic reports, like I was talking about. Audience reports, acquisition reports, behavior and conversion reports, and then there's important integrations. And that's another thing that you won't necessarily get out of just going online and watching the videos or reading through the course materials on the Google Analytics Academy. So I want to talk about really all of the practical stuff that will just kind of get you to the punchline and get you off and running and helping. Because it's like you'll get lost in the world. And so that's what I'm trying to bring all this to the surface. So we're going to look at the key factors. We're going to learn, you're going to learn how to see who your web users are. So Google Analytics will teach you who your web users are. Google Analytics will help you understand what products and services that your audience is most interested in. I'm fascinated by how many meetings and conversations I've been a part of over the last 8 to 10 years where there's a lot of respectful guessing on what business owners or marketing departments think that their target audience is interested in, and Google Analytics will tell you that. And so paying attention to the data, I'm very passionate about that. How your audience finds you, so this is another huge thing Google Analytics will tell you. And then of course, so those top three are, in my mind, business analytics tools that anyone who's not even a part of a digital department or a digital strategy at a business would be interested in. Like, these are things that everyone in this room can use to be smarter and provide more value to their coworkers and the people around them as you guys are working in your professions. What pages and elements of your website are most effective and ineffective is more geeky. That's more our world, where we use that as part of our process. But I think it's important for you all to be educated on that, because if you're ever working on improving your website, using this kind of data can get you to that punchline, where again, you don't have to have as many conversations around what people think might be happening. It's pretty cut and dry where to go. And so that's something I'm pretty passionate about too, sharing that part. Examining the effectiveness of your digital marketing efforts is another part that's more on the, I would say, the data geek, digital geek side of things, where we would look at, is it a particular type of social media post? So this might be something probably that Brittany, Rachel, would be very interested in particular, learning about how you can use this tool to see what particular type of Facebook post is working best, what particular day of the week might work best, kind of supplementing the Facebook data or social media data around that. And then creating business intelligence dashboards. I'm going to show you guys a little bit of that. That's going to be where we set up like a conversion. So each business has different types of conversions. They're not all e-commerce. Some of them are lead generation, but it's not even just the generation of a lead or someone filling out a form. It's also the fact that there might be a group of pages that a user could view before they fill out the form that might indicate somebody coming back to fill out the form later because of a different type of purchasing decision. And so I'll show you guys kind of the thought process behind that. So again, while Google Analytics is a digital tool, it helps us understand far more about our businesses than just the web data. And so I'll walk you guys through some examples here in terms of what I'm talking about. Demographics and interest reports are a big part of Google Analytics now. This is a feature that Google has added over the last 3 years, and it's starting to become more and more accurate. It's able to tell you basically your marketing funnel, who they are from a gender, age, and interest standpoint. And so your marketing funnel is actually broken down in Google Analytics by these 3 different types of segments. They categorize them as affinity, in-market, and other interest categories. And so if we were to diagram like your marketing funnel, this will maybe be useful later, is you would have Google Analytics kind of defines this. If you see other interests, this is an actual category in Google Analytics that represents people that are just outside of your marketing funnel. And then you have affinity category are people at the top of your marketing funnel. And then your in-market segments are representing those that are more likely to make purchases for you. So these have some kind of awareness of your brand already. And these are people that are actually likely already making purchases from you or very interested in making purchases. And then this kind of represents your opportunity. So I'm just kind of cutting to the definition because you'll see under demographics and interest reports these 3 different categories. So that's the other thing I'll do today is just define these terms, because as you're poking around Google Analytics, I think it'll be helpful for you guys to have as much context as possible. So examples of what products and services that your audience is interested in, it's important to look at something like your top pages on your website, and not necessarily by the amount of page views that they get or the amount of unique visitors that they get, but more along the lines of these engagements that I'll define along the way, but how long someone would spend on each page, and bounce rate, which is looking at engagement level. So you see here on this particular screenshot, bounce rate on the site-wide is very low. It's very good. It engages the users very well. About 95% of users stay engaged throughout the site. And then you have these different pages that have very low, in this case, 0% bounce rate, so they're 100% engagement. And then you can see at what rate are people exiting on each page. So this kind of data is going to vary from website to website, but it's important to look at these different, in this case it's an e-commerce site with different products, so it can help us make decisions on where opportunity lies on each particular product. Here's another example of a website. We've got some different data here. So in the green you can see pages with lower bounce rates that are making better connection with the target audiences that are entering in on these pages. And then you have in red the higher bounce rates. So in terms of more on the web usability side of things, if someone were to come and say, how can we improve our website? One of the top things that we would do is take a look at pages under Google Analytics and start to compare those with the lowest and highest bounce rates. And then I'll walk you through an exercise later on where we go and we see, now let's go look at this page. In this case, it's a the menu page versus the home page, and the locations page, and the rewards page, etc. And let's take a look at what are the commonalities on these pages that are performing well versus the commonalities on the pages that aren't performing as well, identify those, and then use that as a way to go in terms of crafting a new page with the commonalities of the pages that are performing better. So I'll walk you through some examples of that. One more thing on this same point is you can see a visualization of how people actually move through your website. And it'll show you essentially like your top five pages that get the most traffic, and then how users flow through them. So it's called the behavior flow, and it's an interactive tool. So we'll get a little bit into that later, and actually go through a visitor flow, behavior flow. So we'll get started on some of the exercises now. Google Analytics, how to get set up. So starting at the beginning, if you're starting a brand new website or you're not sure if you have Google Analytics installed yet, you can go to analytics.google.com, and this is what you're going to see. And when you create an account, you're doing it with an email address. And the reason I say this is because there's kind of two different definitions of account. And it really applies to the agency world pretty hardcore. If you're managing multiple, like we happen to be fortunate enough to have access to probably like 500 different website Google Analytics accounts. So we need to stay hyper organized in terms of making sure that at any given time we can give access to any of those website accounts to any personnel from that company or any partner agency or anything like that. And so this is where this setup process is very important to make sure that it's done the right way. So you'll set it up with an email account, and it can either be at gmail.com, free gmail.com account, or it can be if anyone uses, I know most of you in here actually use or not all of you, but I think a good portion of you actually use like the G Suites, like Google Mail for your business. So you might have profastpitch.com, but it might be an actual Google account, so you can use that. So ours is datadriven.design, so we do that as well. And so each email account actually gives you 100 Google Analytics accounts. So that's kind of the dual definition of account. And what you want to do is make sure that each time you set up a new business, that it's its own new account. Especially like I would say for Rachel or for Brittany, Sherry, like anyone who if you're going to be managing multiple clients, because what ends up happening if you don't do it, if you do it at the property level, which I'll show you in a minute, is you actually end up having multiple clients under the same property, and then you can't give the client actually access to their Google Analytics account without giving them access to all of your clients' Google Analytics accounts. So this is kind of the main point here. So these are the screens that you'll see. It's very straightforward. It just wants you to fill out, it wants you to name the account, name the website, put the accurate web URL in here, and it gives you your tracking ID. So then it drops your tracking ID. It's always going to be UA dash and then the number. And it stands for Universal Analytics. So the UA number, you'll hear me say that all the time. I'm a geek. Does a website have a UA number? There's an easy way to see if a website even has Google Analytics on it without even having back-end access to the website. So I'll walk you guys through that too. It's basically looking in the source code and seeing if there's a UA number. It's super simple to get this installed on your website. It's going to give you your Universal Analytics JavaScript code. It's just a small little script here, and you can see where it says end script. And you just need to put that in your website somehow, and it gives that code at the account level, but it's going to automatically create a new property for you because it knows a property just basically means website. So like for example, data-driven design, we might have data-driven.design, and then we might start data-driven.education. That would be a new website. So then we would have two different properties. So this is what that screen, this is what your main administrative screen will look like when getting set up. You'll have your account. Again, if you hit this drop down here, you can see up to 100 of them. And then at the property level, it'll give you 50 properties. So it's pretty robust, totally free. Again, you don't have to pay for any of this. And then so getting it into your website is usually straightforward as well. I've given WordPress and Squarespace examples up here. This is the WordPress example. So there's a couple different ways that it can be done very easily. Each WordPress theme, there's a good chance, has a spot to put Google Analytics code. Under every theme has a theme options section. So I would first recommend going into theme options and seeing if there's a way to just go ahead and paste in that script that I was showing you on the previous screen. A lot of times though, it's as easy as just plugging in the UA number. It's going to do the exact same thing. So there's a Google Analytics plugin by Jeff Starr called GA Plugin Options that if you're managing any kind of WordPress site and your theme doesn't have the theme options to put in the JavaScript, you could use GA Plugin Options plugin, and then just all you do there is take your UA number and just paste it into to that field. And then you've got Google Analytics up and running on your site, and you'll start getting data within the next 24 hours. The bad news is you won't be able to ever retroactively go get any data, so that's why we're always hyper about like, hey, did we install Google Analytics on this website right away? Because you can never go back in time and get data that hasn't been recorded. So the Squarespace example for any of you Squarespace folks out there is, this is always going to be the same for every Squarespace site. You're going to go, if you have a Squarespace site, you're probably familiar with this, you're going to go to Advanced, then External Services, then Google Analytics account number, and then put your UA number there, and you're up and running. So that is easy. Now, I talked about accounts and properties. Did that all make sense? Does anybody have any questions on that? Happy to answer any questions. No questions are out of line here. Then there's views. So the concept behind a view, now we get into a little bit more of the strategic stuff. And ideally, if you take the Google Analytics Academy online, they're going to tell you to set up a core set of views. They're going to tell you to set up, your default view is going to be called all website data. So I would say 90% of websites just have that one view. And that's fine. I mean, it's better than not having any data. But then you'll get into a conversation with someone who will say, well, what about my internal users? Like, I don't want to see them, because that skews my web traffic. So this is where it starts to get in, and now you start to use some of this stuff. So then ideally what you want to do is set, under your property, set a test view and a master view. So your test view would basically just be to test something like a filter, like an IP filter. So you would take your company's internet service provider or your IP address, and you would create a filter for that, which I'll show you how to do in an exercise. And then you would test that against your all website data view. And then if that works, you've also created your master view. So basically your test view just verifies that what you're trying to do is working. And then as long as it is, then you're using your master view to kind of see your real data that you're going to track against. So that happens all the time. That's the number one thing that happens is client says, hey, I just want to filter out my own web traffic. So whether they work from home or they have multiple office locations, you can create filters for all of these, put them in, and create up to 25 views in a property. So there's other kinds of strategies behind creating views. Internal IP filter, partner IP filter, that's what I was just talking about, where you take an IP address and filter it out. Other ways that we've done cool stuff that I think is cool, is you can set up like you could use views to set up like different dashboards. So if you work at a larger company, or you have a client that's larger and you're trying to set up a little bit of Google Analytics business intelligence for them to help them make some decisions on their marketing strategy. Like an executive level person probably wouldn't get as granular as like someone in the marketing department, like an analyst. So you could have like an analyst view, and you can use goals in the analyst view that are different than the goals in like the executive view. And what I mean by that is like an analyst might want to see down to the detail about how many people view this particular page on our website. That's going to be important to an analyst because they're going to want to know, well, what's the bounce rate of that page versus the bounce rate of this other page, or how many arrows were clicked on this page versus this other page. It will help them make a decision. The CEO or the COO is not going to care about that. They're going to care about purchases made in this particular time period, right? So you can actually use views as a simple way of having like a CEO dashboard, a marketing department dashboard, and let's say like a sales department dashboard. So a practical exercise we'll work on together real quick will just be, I'm going to show you guys how to just create an IP filter, what I talked about earlier. And with the filter, you're going to have to do that at the account level, so I'll show you guys that real quick. So we're going to be kind of going in and out of my presentation here. So if we wanted to create an IP filter, we would go over to our admin view, which I'll get to here. Got all my tabs prepared. Just need to find it. All right. Here we go. So your little icons over here, I'm just going to pull this out to make it easier. So this is going to be our core of what we walk through today. And I'm going to go over to the little gear icon here for admin, and then that's what's going to give me this view. So if you're looking for this view, just remember to go over to admin, and then you go under your account, you can create a filter over here. And it's just as simple as add filter. You're going to name it. So an example would be office IP filter, just to filter out our office traffic. Ideally, we would have a test view here, like I told you about. We've just got this all website data view, which is the default that it gives you. So actually, let's back up. What we would do is we go over to view and create a new view.
Where are you to do that?
You go to, so this is going to be like back to when you first create the account. You're going to go, this is going to be the view that you get. This is going to be the screen that you get after you create your account. And or click admin. And then you'll go over to view and then create new view. And I'm just going to name this test view. Create view. And then now once we do that and we go over to add our filter, so again it's just all filters and add filter. Now we'll see test view, so we can apply the filter to any or all of our views at this level. So for this example, what we would do is you can select to exclude this, because in this case you can either include it or exclude it. In this case we want to exclude any traffic that's coming from our own office, because we just want to show it for the purpose of new users or users other than us that are our actual audience. So we could do it from an IP address, which is probably the most common way to do it. I think mostly everyone would be familiar with what an IP address is, but it's essentially just a number that's related to the internet service that you're getting at your location. So generally a good way to do this is you could go to Google what's my IP, and it'll give you your IP address. basically right in the search result. And then, so what I'm going to do is just paste it over into my field here and apply it to my test view. And then basically what this is going to do is, and then under this here, what this is referring to that are equal to is it's going to filter out anything exactly from this IP address. So my assumption in this conversation is that we're at eSpaces. eSpaces IP address for the internet that's coming into our computers is this number. I'm just going to make it equal to that number, and then I'm going to add it to my test view filter and save it. Now I have this office traffic IP filter that I can apply to any of my views. Have I totally lost everybody, or does this somewhat make sense? So again, this will all be on our website, and then any of you can obviously contact any of us at any time. We can help with any of this, but I just wanted to kind of walk through the exercise. If there's anyone who has Google Analytics pulled up, you don't have to right now. I would recommend that you probably don't, but if you do have Google Analytics pulled up and you wanted to try to walk through it right now, we certainly can do that. Cool. So this is kind of along the lines of making sure that we have the most accurate possible data. It kind of goes with the setup. So now we get into a little bit more of the fun stuff. So now you're set up. I mean, after that, like, you don't even have to do a filter. You could just put the code in. It's good to have the data. Like I said, better to have some data than no data at all. Now you're going to start to get, 24 hours later, you're going to start to get data. So
From a hygiene standpoint, how
Yeah.
do you keep track of it? Do you have a log? So, or to say, how did I
like
set it
what
up?
we did, like when we documented.
Yeah. Or do you just go in and double check it?
I use the platform as the log. So that's a good question. So I'll just go back to this slide. So at your account level is where you can kind of keep all of your filters. And then you can apply them to different views and not to other views. And so that's kind of that's kind of your master list, I guess. And I mean, it's never a bad idea to, and that's like, I think the same thing applies like with anything that we talk about today. You can always kind of go back into the platform and reference what you did. So I'll show you, I'm glad you mentioned that because I'll show you a few other examples of that. The thing about Google Analytics is like, the more complicated you make it on yourself, the less likely you are to ever use it. The number one thing about Google Analytics, just at a practical standpoint, is that nobody uses it. They put the code on their website, they feel good about having the code on their website, and then they walk away. But what I want to try to get you guys in the mindset of is just like some of the basic stuff where you could get value out of it. Like, I want you all to want to check in on it every month. To try to keep it at the simplest possible level, I think is going to be the way to do that. And then the more that you create work for yourself within this, I think my opinion is that the less likely you are to actually use it as a tool to help your business. So when you start getting data, you'll get your home screen will look like the top of it will look like this, and it'll give you some real-time reports. So this starts to become beneficial as it relates to, it could be related to marketing campaigns. You know, we know that at 1 o'clock today we're going to send out a press release, and so we want to monitor the web traffic on our site at that time, and we want to let our hosting provider know if they have to expect a spike in traffic. Well, you can actually not have to rely on anyone from your technical department to give you that information. You can actually stay fully in the know just by going into Google Analytics and seeing exactly how many people are on your website at any given time and what pages they're visiting. So that's pretty practical use of it. This is more of what that looks like from a drill down standpoint, so you can see this particular website. 31 active users at any one given time is actually a high number. So we call those concurrent users. We can see how they got to the website and what pages they're on. One thing I wanted to show you guys too, this kind of goes along with like how can we keep it as easy as possible on everyone to actually use this. On your screen when you first, so this is what the full version of your screen will be when you're logged in and you have data coming in. You can actually go over here under intelligence. This is called the intelligence feature, and you can just type in what you're looking for, and it works really well. So you can say, I just want to see my mobile traffic, or like you could put like mobile versus desktop, or see, I always go look for it in here because I know it's second nature to me, but you could go over here, like this one is like this week versus last week. You know, you type in this week versus last week, it'll show you your change between, you know, November 27th through December 3rd versus November 20th through November 26th, right? So it does that automatically for you and gives you a little bit about users, new users, and sessions. So I'll just go ahead and define that right now. So a session is any visit to your website. A user can have multiple sessions. So the user number is always going to be lower. So if I go to our website 52 times in one day, but Kate goes to our website once, there's going to be 53 sessions and 2 users, pretty much. Unless the caveat there is that there's a default half an hour period. So if I go to our website 26 times at 10 a.m. and then 26 more times at 1 p.m., I'll count as 2 users. So that's the difference between a user and a session. And then a new user is what it sounds like. It's someone who's never been to your website before in the last 30-day period, but comes to, or excuse me, whatever date range you've picked in your date picker, your new user number will change because it's going to say, this is how many users that came to your website in this time period had never been to your website before. So I wanted to show you the intelligence feature because it's just kind of an easy way of getting to what you want to look for without, and it wasn't there when I started using Google Analytics like 10 years ago. It didn't exist, so I think it's pretty cool. That's another thing, Google will add new features all the time. So the importance of the date picker I just talked about, like always remember to choose your date range. That's like probably another thing that like doesn't ever really get talked about as it relates to Google Analytics. The number one thing of just kind of, I guess maybe it's hygiene, maybe not, but just data accuracy is, you know, pick the date range at which you want to be looking at data for, and then you can. One of my favorite things to do is to always compare date ranges against one another. So I'll show you guys how to do that. So the thing I wanted to do, this is called the audience. This is the audience overview. It's under audience reports. This is where you see basically like you're quantifying how many people have come to your website during this particular date range. And then these 2 numbers right here are that, but then these numbers, page views, pages per session, session duration, and bounce rate are what I call engagement statistics. So it's how well is your website doing at taking in the traffic, at keeping the traffic engaged that it took in. My philosophy is that these numbers are more important than these 2 numbers because we could use some of the concepts that we'll talk through today. If we can lower an 86% bounce rate, does anyone know basically what an 86% bounce rate means? Like how I would define it is like 14% of the traffic, 14% of these almost 2,000 people actually counted as a web visitor. So you just times this number by 0.14. That's actually how many people that this website actually got during that time period. So if you can lower this number, it's far more cost effective to do things to lower that number than it is to go out and get more of these people. So we'll walk through a lot of those concepts. So I think these engagement numbers are more important, but we just talked about sessions and users. Page views, totally self-explanatory. It's basically, and then when you put together pages per session, it's how many pages a user views in their session. How many, I shouldn't say user, how many pages are viewed in a session by the person who's having that session. Session duration is how long they stay on the site for during their session.
What's a good bounce rate?
A good bounce rate is,
Or like a range that you feel is good?
Good is like 40 to 50%. slightly close to great would be lower than 40%, and a great bounce rate would be like 20 or lower.
Is that across the board? Because I've noticed like with my clients, when we're running ads, the bounce rate comes up because we're sending more traffic versus the organic traffic that are actually looking and interested. So I have to explain to them
Yes.
when we turn something on, if your bounce rate is going to go up.
Yes, you're paid. It's very common for paid campaigns to increase the bounce rate. There's obviously ways to then use that to make sure that your paid campaigns are. So when that happens, it's usually because the paid campaigns. It's an indicator that the paid campaigns are not relevant to the user, and then you have to tweak your paid campaigns to keep lowering the bounce rate. But you're right. I mean, the first thing that usually happens is that the bounce rate skyrockets when you're paying for traffic, and when your traffic increases, it is harder. I do see that. Like, I was just doing an analysis the other day, and you see like larger brands that have more, like millions and millions of users. A really good bounce rate for them is more in the 40s, whereas it's possible, but it's harder for a brand like that bringing in so much traffic to stay in the 20s. But so that's why I give a range on that. So in an audience report, something that you could do that happens all the time. Again, I want to try to make this about how is this beneficial for business, like just business professionals, people who aren't even really in the digital part of this. So if you're trying to help out your teammates in a meeting or something like that and provide value, this is an example that happens all the time. So if you pick your date range, this one just happens to be like year to date, 2017, real web data. Huge traffic drop off in the middle of Q3. So we drill down on that later into the acquisition reports, which I'll show you, and you can see why that happens. But number one is you can use this audience report as an indicator to see things like, okay, well, what happened from a business standpoint that was probably negative that caused this traffic decrease? And then on the flip side, like this spike right here, often would indicate a business function potentially outside of digital that brought in more users than the site was used to. And then you can drill down even further. Well, what did we do on that day that probably did really well? You know, and it might so I can't tell you how many dozens of times I've gone in and said, or someone from our team has gone in and said, hey, like, what happened on this day? And then like the business owner or the marketing director was like, oh yeah, like we did this thing and we didn't even really, like, thanks for pointing that out. We didn't even really realize that was so successful, and that, you know, to quantify that. Another thing in an audience report is you can go. So this is all under the first category of who are your web users. So in that, along those lines, in addition to the demographics and interest reports, it's also who are they in terms of what device are they on. So how are they using your website? How are they finding you? So here's a good example of just when you go look at what type of device category users are viewing your website on, you start to see potentially some really interesting and shocking data. Like in this particular case, 85% of this website's users year to date are on a phone. 85%. So like we all read a lot of headlines, we all hear a lot of things, and we hear like, well, everyone's on a mobile device. Well, a lot of times I'm looking at the data, or someone from our team's looking at the data in Google Analytics, and we see 25% on a mobile device, 27% on a mobile device, maybe 33 is high, okay, 85. So it's really about just go find out. Like instead of guessing how many people are viewing your, you know, potentially going to view you on a mobile device, it's all right here to go check out. So then, of course, we prioritize the mobile side of their web, and it's justified. Like almost all of the effort should be around what does that site look like on a mobile device, not because we think people are moving to mobile, but because we have data showing that. Another example where this can be used from a business perspective in addition to just digital is let's say you're looking at a marketing strategy around where to target people, or even opening up a new location, whether it be opening up a new location, and I'll use you guys, right? Opening up a team in a new market. So on the pro fast pitch softball web data side of things, you could go, I did city, but you could go, you could go sit the city route, or you can do kind of a map view of the US and visualize it that way and see what markets have the most interest. So for franchises or pro sports leagues, which is really cool for me to talk about, you can look at where your interest is coming in. And then of course, like cross-reference that with the bounce rate. So like Mount Juliet, for this particular website, 95% of the traffic's bouncing. It has a higher number overall than Clarksville, but Clarksville has a lower bounce rate. So then when you start to take those factors into account, and you have Clarksville appears to be spending a little bit more time on the site as well. So just kind of drilling down into that. So our practical exercise is a super simple one. I think it's even easier than setting up an IP filter, is enabling demographics and interest reports. So my experience about 2 years ago was that no website had these enabled. And I've been pleasantly surprised to see over the last couple of years, because I don't know why Google Analytics doesn't just by default enable this, but they make you actually go in. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up. So always remember, if you're looking at Google Analytics or kind of talking to people about looking at their data, to try and help them remember to get this done. Otherwise, they won't have all the data that I'm about to show you guys. So that
How do
is,
you do that? How do you enable it?
you're going to go to, I brought up a website that didn't have it enabled. Okay, so this particular website did not have it enabled. So I'm just going to back out of this particular one so you can see it kind of from the start. So this is the view. When we go in, we're going to want to go into audience. And everything I've shown you up until this point has been under audience. These have all been audience reports. So the mobile, demographics and interests, the audience overview with the traffic and all that, that's all under audience. So it's all under here. When you click audience, all this will drop down. So you go to demographics and then overview. And then normally you would see data, but if it's not enabled, you see enable. And then basically all you have to do is click enable.
Okay.
And then it'll tell you within basically 24 hours from now, you'll start to have data. This data comes from social media. So anytime a web user, essentially everyone's logged into all their social media accounts all the time, and their browser cookies remember that. So whether they're in Chrome or Safari or Internet Explorer, they're typically logged in all the time, because they don't have, that way they don't have to log in every time, unless they're on a shared computer or a shared device. So Google Analytics tracking code on a website will just take Kate Hickey's Facebook profile information, pull it into data-driven design web analytics when you visit data-driven.design, and then it won't show up as this is Kate Hickey, but it'll just aggregate that data in. So the demographics, now they're enabled, and then if we were to go into like this website who's had it enabled for quite some time, we'll see the gender breakdown. So this one happens to be interesting, 81% female web users. And you'll see that it's 49% of their total sessions. So what that means is basically that 49% of their total sessions have passed in this date range of, it's actually only like the last week. So if I expanded that out year to date, the number would go up to probably 60-some% of total sessions, which gives you more of a sample size. But it's basically enough to say, all right, this represents data that we've aggregated from all these social media profiles that have visited your website. So this sample size of your audience gives us enough to say that your web users are 81% female. your largest age range is the 25 to 34 demographic. They are interested in the people most likely to purchase from you, to make a purchase from you, are interested in these things: home and garden, home decor, apparel and accessories, women's apparel, etc. So this spirals very quickly into now this is data that can be used for like a digital marketing strategy.
Yeah, mine is.
The people most likely to purchase products from me or services from me are interested in these things. They're coming from social media data. If we go do a Google display ad campaign or a social media campaign of any kind, these are the people that are lowest in our funnel that we should target first. So that's how to enable demographics and interest reports, and a little bit of kind of how to read and interpret and use them. Any questions on that, or anything you guys want to talk about before we go to acquisition reports? Kind of goes into, it segues nicely into what we're already talking about. So, all right. So now we see if we want to drive more, kind of like twofold. We all want to drive more traffic to our website, but we also want to know what's effective and what's not effective at helping us reach our goal. So let's just take Innovate Medical as just an example, because you have some lead generation that do you have any e-commerce? You don't have any e-commerce on the site functionality. So that's why I like it as an example, because like for you guys, in my mind, you're gonna have either it's a lead or there's no lead. But then there's this whole middle ground that you don't really know what's happening. And so when we talk about goals, I'll kind of like bring that example through because we can set up goals that basically anyone, I'll show you guys how to do this in the last exercise, is you can set up a goal where you just say like, this is a success, I want to count this as a thing if a user comes to my website and within that same session views like these 3 pages or more than 2 pages or spends more than the average amount of time on my website. Things like that will then indicate that that's a quality web user. So now you have this thing conceptually that is in between a conversion and just web traffic that's called a quality web user. So you can track that, and then you can see in your acquisition reports, which you'll go to under acquisition and then all traffic, and then channels, you'll see this view where you can see at a high level paid search, which includes everything where you would pay for a click, so Google, Bing, all those networks. Organic search, which is your SEO on Google and Bing. Direct, which is people directly typing in your web URL. Referral, which is any website that's linking to you, any web link, even a link from an email. Email, which is email marketing. So that would be like your Emma or your MailChimp or Constant Contact data. Social, which aggregates together all of your social media, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Display, which is its own category outside of paid search, which would include any Google display campaigns.
What's referral?
Referral is going to be any link, any hyperlink to your website. So it'll include social media actually on a few different views. In this view, it's pulled out separately from social media. It's going to be anything like a partnership. Like let's say, Paul writes for Forbes, right? So like the Forbes link to New Heartland Group is going to show up under referral. It's going to say 211 session, or 200 out of the 211 sessions came from Forbes, which would be amazing. And then 6 people transacted, so that, this is where I was going, Megan. So like now over here under your conversion side, it starts to make even more sense to use this as a tool because you've got the ability to see, this happens to be an e-commerce site, but this drop-down menu could be any of your, they give you 20 goals on each view. So we could set up, here's an example. The average user spends 2 minutes on this site. So 4 minutes would be obviously double the average user, which would be an extremely qualified web user. So we can set up a goal that would show up over here, and the goal can be spent 4 minutes or more on the site. And now all of a sudden, that is a conversion that we can see. All right, let's just pretend that that's what this says. So 50 people from our paid search campaigns spent 4 minutes on the site. That would be an indicator, even if there's only like one lead, it would be actually an indicator that in that time frame, it's actually working. It's bringing in people who, depending on your sales cycle, you got to think through, like, would they fill out the form in the first week anyway? Or would they come to the site, check it out, come back, talk to people, whatever. I'll show you some other cool stuff around that. But I just want to stop there and say, this is the basic level acquisition report where you can drill down, think of things from two different ways. One, what data is here that could inform you where there's opportunity to maybe go get more web traffic? And then two, what do I already know about that we're doing and how well is it working?
Okay, can I ask 2 questions?
Yeah.
So on the revenue, you said that it's e-commerce site. So like for us, like do we have to load that in, like how we would quantify? Like,
What you can do in Google
like mine says
Analytics,
0.
you can assign a value to a goal. I'll show you how to do that. So a lot of companies will say, all right, we know that we have a 25% close rate on our lead generation forms. And so the average sale on that is X. And so they have a basic formula that tells them the value of the lead. So you can actually put that into Google Analytics. And so it wouldn't be like a straight up e-commerce number. It wouldn't make sense in that case for someone like filling out a form or viewing a page to have a value like that, like
Right.
the actual purchase, but it might be, you could put a value in there. It's an arbitrary number in a sense, but it makes sense to whoever internally has agreed upon the formula of like what's the value of a lead or what's the value of someone spending X amount of time on our site versus the average user who would spend less. There's a bunch of different integrations for e-commerce. So if you did end up selling a product, you can integrate Google Analytics with like a Salesforce or other CRMs to actually retroactively assign value to. This gets into like pretty complicated coding and stuff within Google Analytics, but it is possible to do all that. It's pretty cool. So this is an acquisition report where you select source medium on the left-hand side. And I'll back out and show you guys this view too to kind of recap this. But source medium gets a little bit more detailed because you can see it starts to compare a little bit more around like where the first view showed paid search. Now you can compare like how is Google paid search versus Bing paid search. How is Yahoo organic versus Bing organic versus Google organic. And you can actually like expand this to show 500 rows. So you could really see how is all under source medium, like how is any traffic source performing against any other traffic source as it relates to bringing in visitors, which is why I like the source medium view. Here's an example of referral source, Sherry. So like this website had an article on InStyle.com that sent 336 sessions. Actually did really, so in interpreting this, like I would say this did actually really well because even though like 3 transactions off of an article compared to anything else, Facebook had 5, Facebook had 7, actually that's mobile Facebook. But like out of the 240 unique people or new people that came in through this InStyle article, they didn't just read the page that they came in on. They actually saw 5.5 more pages of that website, and then they spent 90 more seconds, and 3 of them made a purchase. So that would be like, okay, we should figure out more partnerships like that InStyle partnership, or we should maybe go back. Now we know that InStyle.com audience is really interested in our particular business.
So if somebody paid for advertising on your website, that link, you can go back and say to them,
Yes.
because sometimes they'll say, well, we didn't get anything from that.
Yes.
You know,
Exactly.
it's like, really? But you
Yeah.
have the numbers there.
Yes, 100%. So any publisher should be, if you're selling advertising space, looking at this data and figuring out where it's valuable to your advertisers and then reporting back to them on it. And vice versa. Anyone who's buying media should be making sure that they're looking at their own Google Analytics data as it relates to what media they're buying, because the media company, like, no offense to like media salespeople, they're just doing their job. But the reality is, like, the report they're giving you is always going to look really good. And so you want to look at your own Google Analytics data and cross-reference that for what your goals are, your literal goals in Google Analytics, which I'm kind of building up to like the goal. The goal part is my favorite part. We haven't even got there yet.
I'm looking at this and there's a lot of bounce rates at 100%. How could it be 100%? Wouldn't that mean they never even got there, or am I just?
The thing about bounce rate is each page has its own bounce rate, and then each drilling down on the page, each referral source has its own bounce rate as well. So it could have something to do, like, essentially, it does mean that like everyone's bouncing off of that page. So it could be something about the content on that page that needs to be addressed, or it could be some kind of technical issue with the page that might need to be addressed.
Like there's one person here, Brasserie of Bread.
There's also
they came on and it was just.
There's also bots. So that's another thing about filters. Why filters may need to have it doesn't happen on all websites, but in some cases there'll basically be bots that will crawl websites. And so I've seen a lot of times where if everything's a 100% bounce rate, chances are that it's not actually real human traffic. And so what we can do is go into referral sources and find if there's any IP addresses that are showing, and then we can filter out those IP addresses. So those would be kind of some things that I would maybe make note of, Sherry, like you were talking about earlier. So one last thing under acquisition reports. I just want to talk about the case I talked about earlier, where I said, okay, in Q3 there was like this massive traffic drop off. In that particular case, it had to do with, you can kind of see, I just took screenshots and put them right here. So like direct traffic dropped off, display traffic dropped off, and social traffic dropped off, and so did referral traffic, but not any one had an impact like organic search. So there was some huge SEO issue with this particular website. And when I showed this to the owner of the business, and he said, oh yeah, well that was exactly when our website got hacked and went down. And so you can like quantify, I mean, in this case, it's quantifying the impact that has on your, like something like that would have on your SEO, and then what SEO, so twofold, then what SEO, because it's not the same for all businesses. In his case, SEO, he was relying on heavily, and it totally plummeted almost all of his web traffic during that time frame. And it's taken several months to build that back up. So that's just an example of, again, some of the things that the audience reports can tell you. I spent a lot of time actually early in the process on behavior reports. So what I'm going to do in this section is walk you guys through like an exercise how conceptually we apply this. So we would look, again, I talked earlier at looking at, if we're just going to look at bounce rate. So the question in this case is, what can we improve about our website? How do we make it, like what's the low-hanging fruit? And so initially in the top 10 pages, I see 4 pages that have outlier high bounce rates. I see 2 pages that have outlier low bounce rates, which is positive. I see one that I really need to look into, which is this free estimate page. And then another, which 68% is not great, but in the context of this site, it's lower than the site average, so I actually put it in green. So my exercise here is, we're gonna look at when I was talking earlier about, what did I say, commonalities between the high-performing pages and low-performing pages, this is exactly what I mean. So the commonality in this case on the low-performing pages versus the high-performing pages just cutting to the chase and not going through all the pages, but just pulling them out here, is this slider. So this happens to be a slider that like goes every 2 seconds into a different picture. And so other than that, it's basically the exact same web page layout with a little bit different content on it. So you've got a page literally that just does not have the moving slider that engages 96% of its traffic. And then you've got a page over here that engages 31% of its traffic that has the same exact stuff. So it was a perfect little A/B test for me to take this back to the business owner and say, look, like, stop the slider. Like, don't have a moving slider on this page. You could even remove it, and now all of a sudden you would have, like, the math game is that instead of having, so he basically had 1,400 sessions during this time frame, but only 442 counted because of the math. So either he just eliminated that slider, he could go back up to basically 1,300 sessions, and he's paying for them. So now all of a sudden, this is when I say conversion optimization, this is basically all it is if you can optimize the people that are on your site, then you don't have to go pay for more people. So this is that recommendation. And then this basically it's the same thing. I just used the 68% because it was another A/B test. It was, here's a group of pages that have headlines, but then there's a group of pages where you actually see above the fold the body copy and the image, the top of the image, and they performed at a drastically different rate. So that was another recommendation of, on your interior pages, make sure that you can just move everything up, and you're gonna get some incremental value out of that. Same exact website, use the user flow. This is where I was validating that free estimate page. So that free estimate page was a website with no content, just the form. So 100% legitimate, 100% bounce rate. Like nobody wanted to fill out the form. So, and it's more about, there was nothing else there of value to the user. They're paying. So what this means right here is Google cost per click. So this is the behavior flow. I'll show you guys this. You can sort the behavior flow by different things. So I go into the behavior flow and I sort it by the source medium. Does that make sense based on what so I showed you the behavior flow early, and then I showed you the source medium and explained what that was, where it's Google cost per click or Facebook. And so you can see here, all of the traffic from Google cost per click goes to the free estimate page. See this little thin line? It's like 2% of the 2% of the 524 people actually continued on, but they just clicked on the home page and then they dropped off. So really 100% nothing. The other 98% just immediately dropped off, didn't fill out the form. So it's, I mean, was it working? No. What do we know how to improve about it? Add some value around, well, don't have the slider. Have some body copy that they can read with some imagery that engages them, and then have the form to follow up after they engage. So then we say, okay, here's a mock-up of what we would do with your pages based on that data. So this is kind of like the practical application of it. All right, our exercise is the
I don't have
user
that
flow.
user flow on my dashboard.
I'll show you how to get there, and then maybe, so if you go to, what was I gonna use for user flow? Here we go. So this is a user flow. If you go to behavior and then behavior flow.
See, it doesn't even show up on hers in behavior. She gets new versus returning, frequency, and engagement. That's it.
Can't you set up the filters though?
I mean, I can always watch by you. I don't know if I'm just missing a button.
You might be under,
It's not worth taking.
audience. So don't go to audience users flow. Try behavior flow. See if that gives you if that works.
Oh, there you go, sorry.
A lot of flows.
A lot of behaviors.
There's a couple different flows.
Thank
They should
you.
both do the same thing, but.
Thank you.
So it's going to default you to landing page, and that's going to be a breakdown of all the different sites that users enter in on from your website. What I did in that previous screen, what I like to do is go to this drop down here, and then under acquisition, do source medium, because that's going to show you more around. It kind of shows you both how people find you and what they do at the same time, which I like better than just seeing how you can see how they enter and then what they do. That's what this is.
So with, because we have agency people here for sure, what do you, like what's sort of the quick answer, because you can't show that to a client, right?
Yeah.
Boom. So
Well-
what do you do really quickly if you wanted to generate this report for your people?
Just kind of pick like one or two main points out of this, and so in my mind it would be, it's always a worthwhile exercise to go